In my 20s, I made a ton of financial mistakes. Now, I did some things right, but I made some mistakes that probably cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I want to share the mistakes I made with you all, so if you're in your 20s especially, you can learn from my mistakes, not repeat them, so by the time you're in your 30s, you'll probably be in a better financial position. The first mistake I made was not saving up enough money. For whatever reason, once I hit around 10K in savings, I just stopped. Now, I know some of you might say like, hey, actually it's a privilege to be able to save. And I will say you are absolutely right. I was lucky to make enough money in my 20s. I was also lucky that things were not as expensive as they were. So I would say, I acknowledge that it's a lot more difficult to save nowadays. Things are more expensive. And I also want to say, if you have the ability to save, keep saving money, because if you hit a certain limit, or if you hit a certain amount and you think you're good, that extra money that you could be saving, you could either be saving it and adding to your savings, or you could be investing. The second mistake that I made was not investing early and often enough. This actually ties and interrelates to mistake number one that I made, which is not saving enough money. That additional money I could have saved, I could have also invested. And I did do a few things right. I would say in one of my jobs, I did max out my 401k, so that was good that I did that. But other times I had extra money, and what would I do? I would spend it on Amazon Prime. I would spend it on clothes. I would spend it on food and other stuff, right? And that money I could have invested. I did some really, really rough calculations. It probably would have netted me at least 100K plus had I invested that money in my 20s. So what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to investing, the earlier you invest and the more often you invest, and obviously the greater quantity you can invest, the better, because there is a magic beyond compound interest. And the more you invest, the earlier you invest, down the road, it will yield more benefits and more dividends and results. So I would say, if you can invest, definitely dedicate a portion of your paycheck to investing, especially if you're in your 20s again, because that will really utilize compound interest and yield dividends down the road. So I did do a few things right with investing in my 401k, kind of, because it's a target date fund. However, I could have invested more, and because I didn't invest more, I definitely put money on the table. The third mistake I made was letting lifestyle creep affect me. So in essence, the more money I made, the more money I spent. So what ended up happening is, in proportion to my salary, I spent more. So even though in theory I might be saving more money, it was actually very marginal compared to my previous salary levels. And a lot of people actually kind of fall into this trap, right? Because let's say you don't make a lot of money, but then you start making more money. It's very tempting to want to spend that additional money that you're earning because you want to obviously experience a better lifestyle. Very, very natural, by the way, in human nature. However, I would say if your spending really increases proportionally with your salary, or that additional money that you're spending that you would not have been spending with your previous salary or money making level, again, that money could be saved, it could be invested, and that long term could give you financial freedom or help fuel financial freedom. So I would say for me, I definitely was guilty of this. There's a point I remember where I was going crazy with Amazon Prime. I was getting packages shipped like a few times a week to my workplace because I didn't want people to steal it from my apartment porch. But there was a point where I was thinking like, you know what, this is all really adding up financially. I should really stop this. And again, this is human nature, right? You want to treat yourself, especially if you're making more money. But I would say, even though it's okay to treat yourself, make sure that you're not falling into the habit of spending even more money to the point you're not able to actually save and invest more money than you used to be able to. The last huge financial mistake I made in my 20s, I'm actually starting to slouch now, so let me sit up. The last huge financial mistake I made in my 20s was getting into heavy debt. So long story short, in 2017, I think it's 2017, I quit my job because I wanted to focus on building an online business full time. I wanted to really give this a go and really see if I can make it work. I burned through my savings. I got into credit card debt, and the main reason is I started to get to a point where I was making money with my business, but my expenses and my living expenses, including business expenses, were higher. So obviously this means I'm net negative, and I did not want to go back to a full-time job. I was this is way before remote work was accepted, by the way. So I was thinking like, hey, I'm youngish. I want to travel. My business is the only way I can actually work and travel at the same time. So I did not want to go back to a full-time in-office job. So for me, this business was my vehicle towards freedom, at least in my perspective. What this meant is I became more desperate to make the business work. And in general, when you make this business decisions out of desperation, that's not a good place to come from. So I started spending more money on courses. Obviously, this is not very logical to do, but I will tell you, when you're feeling desperate, a lot of things are illogical, seem logical, because then you think you're betting on yourself or that you're playing to win. AKA by that, I mean you're spending a lot of money on very expensive courses, padding the pockets of gurus that actually probably won't help you get rich. So what ended up happening is there was one moment I had a let's get real moment. I looked at how much money I made through my business the past year or in the current year. I looked at my expenses that current year, business expenses and living expenses, and I was like, am I positive or negative? Obviously, I knew deep down the answer was already I was net negative. But when I actually saw the actual amount, I thought, you know what? If I was in a company and they were running a business this way, I wouldn't want to be part of that company. I have to get real with myself. And from there, I actually got a full-time job and I stabilized my finances. But while I'm giving you all these story and these details, I actually racked up debt that amounted to 44K. And keep in mind, this is a credit card debt, so there's also interest. So it's not just paying off a balance of 44K, it's paying off the interest from that balance. So that was very, I don't want to say traumatizing, but that was very tough to get out of. I was lucky that I got a full-time job in tech. I was able to dedicate a huge portion of that paycheck and live very frugally for around 2 years and pay off that debt in 2 years. So I know this timeline is probably accelerated compared to the average American, although all of it really is relative. But 2 years, I think, to pay off 44K in debt was pretty good. However, paying off debt in 2 years, I had to be very frugal. And it really felt like I had this weight I was carrying around with me, because I got to tell you, man, every time I logged into my financial accounts and I saw the debt balance, my heart just sank. I was thinking, okay, I really can't use my money for enjoyment because I have to use it to pay off the interest and the balance. So it felt really miserable, to be quite honest, because it's like, hey, I'm making X amount of dollars for my salary, but all that is going towards paying back debt. And all of this is obviously my fault because of my spending. But it just kind of felt crappy in the sense that I felt like I had to defer life and things I want to enjoy by spending money due to having to pay off this debt, which was the right thing to do. So it took me 2 years to get out of the debt hole. And all I want to say is really, as much as possible, avoid debt. Unless you're someone who's super business savvy, super financially savvy, and you know how to leverage debt to make more money. Usually these people are not watching these videos for the most part. But if you are using and accruing debt and you are financing things you actually can't afford up front, meaning you're accruing debt, or you have some sort of payment plan with like Klarna or a firm or whatever it may be, right? I would say that psychology of what's making you spend money you don't have because you think you can finance it or you think you can put on a credit card and pay it off later, I would really urge against that. I'm of the belief, and admittedly I am more financially conservative, that if you don't have that money, if you can't pay for up front comfortably within your budget and it won't wreak havoc with your spending, your budgeting, and basically how much money you have available to you, I would say you shouldn't buy it, or you should wait until you save enough money to buy it. So take it from me, debt is very much like running a financial race. To use an analogy, debt is like running a race with a weight. If you have no debt and you want to get to financial freedom, oftentimes you're going to look at strategies to basically make more money, to save and invest more, and to get to financial freedom faster. So that's kind of like learning how to run faster. However, debt is like you're at the finish line, or actually not at the finish line, rather, you're at the starting line, and you have this huge chain just weighing you down. So no matter what you look into in terms of running faster, let's say like you're like, hey, I want to run this financial race faster, let me do XYZ. In this case, what actually makes sense is to get rid of that chain, that weight, which is debt, that's weighing you down, before you focus on the other details on how to run the race faster when it comes to finances. So I would say heavy debt in general is not good. Heavy debt is even worse. And if you're in your 20s, actually, no matter what your age is, if you're spending money you don't have because you need to finance it, or you need to basically accrue credit card debt and then you hope you can slowly pay it off in like 20 years, whatever the credit card debt timeline is, That's a really bad habit. And I understand there are exceptions to the rule. Like maybe you need to finance a car or lease a car because you need it to get to work and you have to be in the office. So there are exceptions to the rule. But I would say in general, for me, my debt was definitely self-inflicted. For a lot of people, when they start buying really frivolous shit, like, you know, clothes that they don't need or extra stuff or going out to eat when they actually have food at home, that type of behavior is going to basically add to your debt if you are accruing debt on that. And that's going to kill you down the road, because credit card companies, let me tell you, they are tricky. The way they do their interest rates, especially with an average like daily balance, they're tricky. They will get you. They will take your money. They will keep you enslaved to paying them off. So I want to say, really take a look at living in your lane, in your financial lane, living within your means. Make sure you're not accruing debt if you can avoid it, because debt, again, is a financial killer for your financial dreams. So as a quick summary, these are the main financial mistakes I made in my 20s. Number one, I didn't save beyond a certain point. Once I hit a certain dollar figure, I stopped saving. Number two is I didn't invest early and often enough. Number three is lifestyle creep. I started spending more money when I started making more money, which reduced the amount of money I could save and invest. Last but not least, I got into heavy credit card debt, 40K plus. Please do not make these mistakes, especially if you're in your 20s. Because if you avoid these mistakes in your 30s, you'll be far better off financially. And it doesn't matter what your age is. This is just good financial advice in general. I hope this is helpful. If you have any thoughts, comments, feedback, leave it down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. I love you all. See you all next time.